recording button starts, and I am looking at some raised hands, and I'll send you that information if we're still having trouble. But hi, gang, I'm Michelle with Loyalsnap, and I lead the partner program here, and we are really keen on connecting with partners that make studio owners and operators' lives easier by creating a trusted ecosystem of partners that just do the thing and do the thing really well. We've known Zach for a little bit of time, and this is our first co-hosted event. So, Zach, thank you so much for being here and bringing your awesome content to this group here. I'll let you do an intro and then I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be on with you guys and go through this workshop with you all today. And just to kind of tell you guys a little bit about myself, my name is Zach Coleman, no E, just so you're aware. I'm a TEDx speaker and I'm the founder of Creatitive, a grit and motivation focused agency that helps people find their why and implement their why through digital and community experiences. You know, I have worked with studio owners in leadership roles within the studio space for upwards of 8 years now. I started working with professional sports and athletes, and then I finally transitioned over to the fitness studio environment once I actually found some of my values, found my connection. And we've worked with large, big box studios. We've worked with Crunch Fitness, which is still a client of us today. And we work with a lot of smaller boutique studios as well, from startup all the way to the 3 to 7 location market. And what we've seen is whether it be verbal, visual, experiential, it really is affected by our communication, consistent, meaningful, and tailored really to your target audience. It's really the foundations to attracting the right members and the right employees, ultimately really driving that profitability and growth. Yet, most studio owners underestimate the significance of really defining their values, often mistaking those values for just random words that they just throw up on a wall and just kind of leave them there. And in reality, values are really an essential behavioral guideline that really shapes everything from your marketing messaging all the way to your member retention to your employee consistency and really satisfaction. Today, I'm really going to kind of dive into values and how you can kind of utilize them and use them much more towards an actionable guide for your studio to help attract and retain the right talent and allow you to focus your resources on all the other things that truly matter. So today we're going to kind of go through 3 things. Like Michelle said, we do have a workbook for you guys. So once we kind of go through that workbook a little bit, we're going to take, 5, 10, about 5 minutes for each section. Because we only have an hour, I understand that you're probably going to get a lot of these juices after today's workshop. So I highly recommend you kind of take it, sit on it for a little bit, and then work on it with your team after the fact as well. And you're much more welcome to reach out to me after the fact or ask me Q&A questions towards the end of this presentation. But we're going to kind of go through walking through just kind of value creation in general. We're going to kind of guide you. I'll kind of use some examples that I have done internally, like what we have do to kind of help push the needle for you guys a little bit. And then we're going to kind of go through and we're going to use those values to kind of figure out some valuable type questions that you can start using for hiring and existing employees. And then we're going to go down to creating just really a rough template that you can kind of use for your hiring based on those values and behaviors that you want to see to be guidelines for future hires and or internal team as you continue to evolve and grow your studio. Now, I think we've all been there, right? Wouldn't we all love just to jump on a call with that potential employee, have a great conversation, let us build connection, and just hire them? The right people for the right position for whatever growth cycle we're in, or know that the people we hire really enjoy following the passions for the community and the the overall vision that we're trying to strive to grow. I've been there. I remember feeling overwhelmed by the number of people I had to bring on in specific roles, only to have them go show on their first day or move on after a month because they just didn't have the same passion or work ethic as I did for my brand. I focused more on having people follow a checklist item than that took me really out of doing what I do best, which is create profit generating responsibilities. I was consistently burned out. I was hiring, I was firing on a constant basis. And this is not to say that we're all perfect. No matter what, you're always going to have people that we bring into the organization that just might not be a good fit. But as leaders, it's our jobs to dictate and try to promote what we're trying to do within the organization. However, we can kind of guide ourselves towards the type of people that match our vision and our goals for what we want to establish. So I'm going to take you back to around, 10 years ago. I was working as a creative director at Pearson Education. It was my last corporate job before I ended up going out on my own and starting my own thing here. And I had the privilege of having 3 directors within a 2-year period. I kind of called it my Goldilocks experience, funny enough. I went from having a great director to a medium director to having somewhat of a director I didn't really align with. And this made me realize that as people, we can have not just a dream career, but that's not the same thing as having a dream job. And we can always not have them at the same time either. I didn't align with where I was at towards the end of my tenure there, but I realized if I had my original director and the culture was the same and the values, there was a good chance I would have stuck around. But of course, this situation happened for a reason. I wouldn't have built what I have now if it wasn't for those experiences that allowed me to realize that I was misaligned with those values and I wanted to come out and build something of my own. So to start off this little workshop, this workshop portion, I want you to kind of go through and look at this core value sheet. Now, you're probably going to look at this. This is a lot. You may already have some core values. You may need to adapt, which we'll talk about a little bit on the next section. But just kind of highlight the ones that you feel really match where you're at right now within the organization, where the team is at, where all the establishments are at. And you'll see here that these are our 4 values. Now, these weren't always our values. Uh, these values themselves actually evolved over time as my business continued to evolve and grow. And I'll use these as kind of examples going through today's workshop so you can kind of see firsthand experience on how I utilize my values to kind of help dictate behavior. But this shouldn't take you long. If you already have them, great, write them down. If you don't, we'll kind of get into the next section here, which will kind of help you kind of align what you want, but kind of just use your internal feelings. Just kind of pick something off the top that you feel like, hey, these are great values that I think that I want to start evolving within my studios, and I can actually go back and when you go through this process deeper, you're going to be able to fix those for sure. But I'll give you guys just a couple of minutes to kind of go through that. A couple of things to kind of look at here when you're kind of going through these values. You want your values to really focus on uh, some fundamental principles like customer service. They could be customer focused. They can, be integrity, teamwork, excellent. And these actually kind of provide kind of a framework for the decision making and the behaviors across the organization. And you also have, some kind of, I'll say some, you know, what they, and I'm not going to say negative ones, but ones that are going to be a decision no matter what. Like you're going to have certain values that aren't necessarily values, like cleanliness, for instance. That's something that you're going to want your whole team to kind of no matter what have. So I wouldn't use stuff like that. And integrity. I would hope every single person on my team has integrity, has is innovative. So those I'm not going to say are cop out type values, but they're definitely ones that are that a no brainer for me that go above and beyond, that are less so above and beyond. So if you have a couple of those written down, if you do, if you don't, go ahead and write those down now. I'll move to the next section here, and we can kind of get to the next section of the workshop. Now, this one we're going to take about 5 minutes. We're going to take about 5 minutes here. If you have your core values, great. Keep those in the back of your mind. If you don't, then this is a good way for this real first section to kind of say, hey, well, I don't just want to create values and start hiring new people. Maybe I already have people internally and we need to find your values. I'm very big on everyone understanding that values are something that we all live by. They're something that we all enjoy. We all enjoy, not just from a business perspective, but from a personal level. So I like to kind of use this as kind of a guide point on, okay, let's kind of sit down and write people in our organization. Let's kind of write people, and these are all fictitious people. I'm not calling out anyone on my team here, but we have, I'm not going to say negative here. So we have good employees and we have employees. I want you to kind of look at this as more of what are some attributes that they have that you really love about him. John Doe here, for instance, and this is from the perspective of my business, talks with clients, offers suggestions, but willing to collaborate. That's something that I love that John does. Maggie, for instance, takes action, willing to improve processes. And this is how you're going to start dictating and finding some attributes and some behaviors from a positive and a negative that you can kind of say, oh, okay, these are ones I kind of want to kind of behaviorally get out of our studio environment. And these are ones I kind of want to bring in. So it's a good way for you to start finding the values that already exist within your organization. So you can also use the value sheet above and start looking at these attributes and saying, oh, okay, like this already exists. This is something that we didn't even realize existed. On the other hand here, Chris Day and Stephanie, you know, these are attributes they have. They're not necessarily negative attributes at all, but they're definitely something that I look from a behavior standpoint, and you'll see later, or you already saw communication, for instance, that we really want those behaviors to be distinct. I'm very big on all my employees having client interaction. It's very big where in the communication field, I do communication of all types for my clients. And so I'm very big on communication as a whole being a driving factor. And so for someone like Chris Day that doesn't talk too much, this may be something that I say, hey, how can we work with Chris to align towards our vision of connection internally. But overall, I don't want you to think too heavily about this. You have the worksheet. I want you just to kind of write down 2 or 3 people on both sides. You can even do one to start for now. And just write an attribute that you like about them, or one that you feel like could just be a little bit better. And we'll move on, and how we can start taking those attributes and start turning them into questions for future hires. So I'll give it about 5 minutes. And of course, if any of you have any questions, go ahead and write it in the chat. And I'm totally willing to have anyone raise their hand if they have any questions as they're kind of going through this.
Zach, do you do this? Do you recommend doing this with teams? Especially obviously if you're a newly founded team, sets the foundation. But then what do you recommend for studios as they hire at different cadences and is there quarterly check-ins? Are you doing this on a yearly basis? How do you recommend engaging at this level?
Yeah, it does kind of, there is a little difference between the stage growth of where you're at within the growth of your studio, right? Like if you're just starting off or you're under 1 million, you have one location, like you're probably going to be utilizing your personal values and taking those as you continue to hire a team for one location, right? But as you grow and you have 3, 7+ locations, your values are going to be much more aligned with the management team of each location and allow them to kind of take those and breathe them out to the rest of each location. And so quarterly, I would say that you don't need to match them quarterly. I would say your yearly retreat, values do evolve depending on how big you get. They evolve based off the owner, based off of the management. So it's always good to assess, and I'm not going to say change, but evolve based off of the behaviors you're seeing in the organization. And so if you're doing a quarterly check-in, each location is doing a quarterly check-in and kind of figuring out, okay, these are the behaviors I'm seeing, like this worksheet right here. Maybe we kind of got a little bit hasty on the certain types of people we hired, or maybe we're not building as much profits because we're hiring and firing. And so it's also going to be like a one-off situation. But I would say as a management as a whole, I think it's good to assess this stuff on at least a year-to-year basis. Sometimes it's going to be a 10 minute like, hey, how's everyone in the organization? Are they following the values that we have are aligned with? If everyone's on par, then great. If something needs to change or evolve, then that's when you can kind of change or evolve them to try to work through your next hiring process or through your next growth cycle.
Cool. Thanks.
That makes sense. All right, cool. So I don't know if any of you got any of this stuff written down. If you did, great. But just like Michelle kind of said, this is actually a good worksheet right here that you can assess with your internal team per location or your the leadership team. Like, hey, we're going in on a leadership meeting. Let's kind of go down and look at the attributes of each person. It will also kind of help you dictate some additional attributes and or additional things that you're like that could lead to just better profitability. For instance, Chris Day, we noticed that, we see a trend that 4 of our people aren't talking too much to the members when that's what we want them to do because it's about community, right? So how do we either bring something into the hiring process or the ongoing process that evoke better conversations or helping them with conversation? Or how do we just make sure that as we continue to hire more people that we kind of focus on adding that attribute in? And so back to what Michelle said, you could use this on a quarterly basis and just assess this as you're kind of going through. This part right here is
Zach,
probably.
just really quick, just to clarify, are you sharing sections of the workbook right now? We don't see that. So if you are
Can you not
sharing,
see my can you not see my screen?
oh, I can see a little bit more. Yes. Okay. Sorry. I guess I couldn't see it, but now I see it all. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, it scared me. I thought we were going through the whole presentation without seeing my screen.
Got
Uh,
it. False alarm, April Fools, 30 days later. Okay, cool.
all right, cool. So, um, like I said, I totally understand that some of you already have your core values and some may not. The important thing really is here is that your values that you develop are starting to really uh, dictate certain behaviors within your studios. This will help you lead by example better and help you guide those behaviors around your team moving forward. Now, we're going to start getting into articulating valuable questions. How can we dictate human behavior on the hiring process? How do we know candidates match those values after just 1 or 2 interviews? A couple months back, I was having a conversation with one of my cousins. I actually kind of interviewed her. She just had a really big studio experience working with a larger gym, and she kind of admitted to me when she left. Right, she took the job, she loved it. She talked about improving processes, improving programs. The funny thing is that she didn't notice that her coworkers felt very intrusive spot thinking that she was giving them more work. So she was going above and beyond, and then the other teammates weren't really matching those values. And this actually led her to quit because it was because of the organization. And there's always more to the story. Of course, I wasn't there, I wasn't with her. But what I heard is that there just wasn't a culture fit. Either way, their culture was misaligned. And so if that studio would have just vetted around those sets of principles or values a little bit better, maybe they would have guided a set of behaviors around those values and a continued aligned vision, and maybe her story would have been a little bit different. But I say this story because we do have a little bit more control over hiring than we think we do. And in this next section here, we're going to kind of look at how do we start coming up with valuable questions that we can start utilizing based off of our experiences within our studios that we can start using for our hiring. And so I'm going to use an experience on mine. And for this part of the worksheet, I'm not going to expect you to write this whole thing out. This is probably going to take you a little bit of time to come up with some really good questions here. And yes, this is not about the production side of hiring. This is more about the value side. And so I'm not going to say, I still think that you need to have your production style questions that you have for these individuals. But I'm going to use this off of one of mine. One of our biggest values is confidence. So one of the behaviors that we'll talk about a little bit later is willing to get unstuck without resistance, willing to work through something, willing to go a little bit above and beyond. And so use the spot to the right here. I have what makes you stuck. That would be an interview question that I would ask them personally. And write something that more is associated with you and the behaviors that you see. And that's the challenge about this exercise is every single organization is going to have different behavioral sticking points based off of their values. So you need to find something that you see, that you experience on a normal basis, either internally or internally with your existing employees that you feel like, hey, we need to remove ourselves from this behavior. How do we do so? And so, what makes you stick is one of ours. And then just kind of lead up to some clarifying topics here. Explore. We have the clarifying the topic. How did you address that issue? How did you explore it? The solution and the so said action that is evolved after the fact. I'm not going to expect you to fill all these out now, like I said. I think the once we kind of come up with some valuable questions, I'll show you how to utilize them and grain them down and summarize them. I think the most important one really is taking a behavior and taking just the first question, what makes you stuck? And then as you like what makes you stuck, and as you evolve it and grow it, um, you can kind of go in after today's workshop and start coming up with additional leading questions around the question that you pick. So I'll give it just a couple of minutes. I'll give it just a couple of minutes. And if anyone has any questions about the types of questions they feel that they need to write here, or they just have questions in general, I'm much more willing to answer some questions.
Zach, while people are filling this out, when people engage your service, is this kind of thing that you would essentially walk them through kind of on a project basis? Like what are some of the services that would align with kind of what you're presenting here today?
Yeah, so we usually go in and we do brand strategy. So the core values would be part of the brand strategy perspective. So if a team needed us just to come in for a workshop with the organization and leadership as a whole, we would come in and define these and define the values as part of the overall brand strategy. This would be part of it. So we'd go in and we'd work with the whole team to develop the values, develop the mission and the vision, are more align it or evolve it, so to say, towards where they're going to go. And then if they wanted to move forward after that fact, if they felt like they needed a visual representation of that of that brand strategy, then we would work on that. So usually the workshop in general is the first quarter, like get the team aligned and to work together with them to try to help the whole team come up with the values together. And so that's usually what we'll do from a workshop perspective, first and foremost.
Audrey's asking, could you give another example like this one? So she really likes it. So this I think was relative to just this core value sheet on the screen, but is there other examples that you can give
So
us?
question wise,
Yeah.
yeah, question wise. Actually, funny enough, on the next section, I'll give you some.
Take yourself off mute too if you have other things that you want to expand on.
Um, Yeah, definitely. If you want to talk, you can definitely go ahead and talk on it further. In our next section, I'll kind of give you some examples of some other ones. The hard part with me giving you some examples is I don't know some of the behaviors that you have within your organization that you feel may be a question that you have to align when you're hiring new people. What I can do is I can kind of give you an idea of uh, the behaviors I'm seeing, which can help you dictate a type of question, right? So willing to get unstuck is one of them. You know, questions along the lines of if you're seeing a behavior of miscommunication or client member type resentment or hearing miscommunication, you can, ask questions along the lines of, all right, uh, when was the last time you talked to, depending on what they did previously, a client, a prospect, a member, and how did that conversation go? What did you guys talk about? And they can't really lie at that point, right? They can't come up with some, oh, it went handy dandy, it went great. Like you have to dive deeper into it. So you would kind of go, they may say something along the lines of, well, the conversation went great, but they had a little bit of resentment towards their membership fee, and so we solved it. We worked together and we solved it. Like, okay, how did you solve it? Oh, well, we talked about this, and so you kind of clarify the topic, and then you explore. Okay, what did you end up doing for them? What did you end up doing to fix the issue with the membership? You're dictating a behavior now. If they came in and said, "Oh, the person just left," I mean, the member was completely just resentful. So I just gave him a refund and told him to, I'll just be frank, say F off or something like that. Then you're like, all right, well, that doesn't really match how we want to communicate with our members. So maybe that's not something that we want. Or they'll try to fancy it down and say the member was wrong, 100% wrong. And I'm not saying the members are 100% right, but uh, if they do that, then you kind of can dictate some of those questions. I know I got off subject here, but I'm trying to kind of give you an idea of how you can start aligning these questions towards a certain behavior on a value. So let me get to the next section. The next section, when we go through the putting this all together, I'm actually going to give you 4 examples of 4 different questions based off of attributes, which will probably be the easiest sheet for you to kind of work with. I just wanted to give you guys this stuff so that you can kind of have a journey for yourselves to backtrack towards your values. Um, so one thing that I really learned from my cousin experience was when she got hired, she was very excited about the values that her studio had. She was shocked when the culture wasn't living up to those values, right? This wasn't the employee's fault. I looked at it as the leaderships. None of the management was really taking that hiring process seriously when it came to those values, even with the questions that they were asking the employees. In this case, in this case, those words were just words for that particular studio. They were just throwing them up, trying to look good from them. They used them from a visual perspective. Behaviors could have been guided. So as we get to this next section here, this is where I can start giving you a couple more of those questions, right? I'm going to dive in and I'm going to kind of show you my values, and we're going to show you some attributes that I found within the organization and some questions that I ask. And I can even give you further examples, and hopefully that helps you. Hopefully that helps you with your question you had a little bit ago. But let's talk about really employee retention. You can look at it as an operations play, but I also look at it as a very big branding play. It's not just how people feel about your messaging and visuals, but it's also about how your employees feel about the organization. I was at a point in my business where I was hiring people just to follow tasks that were no longer working. So I had to hire people who shared my aspirations and goals and wanted to follow the vision. Our values weren't really aligned yet. I thought I didn't really need these yet. So I built brand strategies that help clients be seen, be heard, but I didn't realize I needed my team to follow that similar vision. Our core values as leaders start with us. It could be from starting with your personal values, which define who we are. It could also guide our management and work through the behaviors we already have within the organization. They kind of form those behaviors. Most importantly, we need to know how our team and prospective employees perceive and act upon those behaviors. They don't need to be your best friends, but building connections with them and sharing similar values will help you and them achieve the vision you want for your studio.
This is a great segue, I think, to Audrey's question. She asked in the chat if behavior is loyalty, not taking advantage of relationships and opportunities for personal gain, what are other things that we could ask? Audrey, if you want to expand, free to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's a
Yeah.
deep.
Um, yeah, I mean, I love the idea that you're sharing here about hiring people with the values because it's hard to change a culture when you already have people that maybe you shouldn't have hired in the first place.
Up, up.
Um, but loyalty is a big one for us, and it's, as a fitness studio, we have a lot of teachers and front desk people who might also work at other places, and that's okay, but I mean, there's a fine line between like I don't know, just using your position at one place to like take advantage of that, at your own like for your own personal gain.
Yeah, what you're bringing up here is really like an aspirational value. An aspirational value is really something that you aim um, to introduce, like loyalty, for instance, is a non-negotiable. In my perspective, is a non-negotiable value, which means it's something that I'm not going to use in this perspective because I would expect all my employees to be loyal. That's just something that's non-negotiable within the organization. So that's kind of one of those value terms that I would say, like, it's very similar to innovation, right? So these probably, to get a little deeper, I would probably look at loyalty and be like, all right, how can we look a little bit deeper into the values and find something that's relatable to loyalty, but it's not as broad. And I'll use a good example from one of mine, which is connection. Connection to me is part of loyalty. I want everyone to be able to connect together and work together. There has to be a sense of loyalty there for that to happen. And so when you're coming up with your values, if you haven't already, I think loyalty is great. But I would kind of utilize that as much more of just like a non-negotiable type value. It's aspirational one. This is one that I want everyone. I wouldn't necessarily use that in the hiring process. I mean, because let's be frank, if you were hiring someone and you had a conversation with them and you were like, hey, so tell me about your last 3 jobs. and they're like, oh yeah, I had them in the last 3 months, you probably know already that they're probably not very loyal. And it wouldn't necessarily contribute to, that they're a job hopper. So, those are ones that are a little bit like easier to spot, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it did. I guess it's an aspirational value, it's a non-negotiable. I guess it's hard for me to know when I'm hiring them which way it's going to go though. And that one question of their job hopping helps, but I guess maybe other ways to sift through the people
Yeah.
that aren't going to be loyal, I guess. Yeah.
And so since that one isn't, I'm not going to say an easier one, but that one is really a lot easier to spot. Um, a lot easier to spot when you're coming up with your questions. Um, you could have a question in there very similar to what I said, and then you kind of go down the list. How did your last job go? How long were you there? Why did you leave? Um, and honestly, you may be even able to spot it based off of their resume
Hmm.
beforehand,
Hmm.
by looking at them. And you may not even
Hmm.
have to have that question. I would still add it in. Like you said, it's a non-negotiable, so I would still add it in to the hiring process. Let me get to this next section here, and you'll kind of see
Sure.
what
Thank
we
you.
did, and I think that will help you kind of clarify how you can start pushing this a little bit forward. So, how can we really start dictating that human behavior to our hiring process? How do we know candidates match those values after just one or two interviews? Something that we just kind of talked about. A couple months back, wait, I already did that part. Apologize. I went backwards. Um, so, looking at this stat, did you know that 33% of studios worldwide have such a bad culture that they spend upwards of 37, if not more, a year recruiting new talent? This was a study done by Forbes, also signified that many workers seek a deeper connection to their work overall. They want to know their contributions make a difference in helping their workplace achieve its mission and vision. And at the same time, they uphold specific values they hope their brand shares. I realized that growing my business to where I wanted it to go, I had to do something different. And going back to one of my lost values of confidence, I was stuck behind a computer screen. I was dictating through the computer screen aspect. And I had to realize that my team wasn't just a number. For me to get to where I wanted to go, I needed that vision and direction. I needed to bring that sense of confidence back myself. It didn't matter if it was my personal values, if it was my brand values. The goal is to have a value that you and your team can live by. So these behaviors are kind of those guides, like I said, towards those values. So what was my experience? I can count on one hand how many times I lost employees due to not matching our values. Before I started to implement those values, I did have some pretty good employees. However, there was this one employee that I had that lacked confidence. But instead of confidence, she had ego. This ego prevented her from adapting to change and growth because she was unable to see past certain expertise. To me, that's not confidence. So I had to restore that confidence back in the organization so that all my staff members started to value those. Some of those experiences, I will admit, they will seep through. Like I have an employee right now that we can see that lacks confidence based off of certain behaviors that he's dictating. And so we're trying to find a way to help him with building that confidence up so he can move on past it. We started to behave within that value of confidence, like I said, and started to hire based off behaviors I saw within it. What that means for me, of course, might be different than you, like we were actually just talking about, but the goal is to develop and or implement guided words to help dictate what you want your studio to feel, say, and act. That's behavior. So getting into this next section here, you'll see that we're going to kind of have our values, line them up right here. We kind of went through and we kind of picked behaviors. we kind of pick behaviors right here, and we from the previous part of the section, and that's when we can start coming up with questions. And so this is a perfect segue of what you were just talking about, because I can kind of show you how I align some of these questions. In reality, that behavioral question up front doesn't need to be some magic bullet question. None of these are magic bullet questions. It's really just what am I seeing, and personally, what are certain situations that are happening. If loyalty is one of them, then yeah, we need to find a way to find a question that matches loyalty. Now, I always only recommend having 4 values, maybe 3. Once you get higher than that, you do have your non-negotiable ones as well. But I really highly recommend not having too many, because people get confused. And so I use an example here from each one of mine, and this is something that I go through the hiring process myself. So what I end up doing is I end up having an interview first and foremost. We go through and we talk through with either the hiring manager or the person that's vetting the role. We'll have a first off conversation just to know that they're about their production, know everything about them in that regards, and then whoever moves on from there will then have a conversation with me, and we'll go through just to see if they match the values aligned with them. And so I'll ask questions like this, like connection we kind of talked about. Willing to work with everyone. Can you share a time you built a strong connection with a client or a teammate? This is supposed to open the door and seeing how willingness they are to connecting with other people. And it's going to be pretty easy to dictate the types of behaviors that come up from the way they answer these questions without them, we'll just say, bullshitting, without them trying to make stuff up. Oh, I make friends with everyone, I'm a great person. No, you kind of have to go in and kind of assess them on this. Confidence, for instance, uh, willing to get unstuck with resistance. We talk about that. What makes you stuck? Talk about a time in their life. What makes you stuck? What was a time in your life that made you stuck? It can be work, it can be personal. It doesn't matter. Contribution, willing to help out teammates and clients. Have you ever had a teammate ask for help? What did you do? Communicate, willing to communicate without doubt. The client demanded for you to do things their own way. How did you respond? And so asking with leading questions. So what makes you stuck is really just the beginning, right? So what was your last job? What was it like? Oh, what made you leave? What made you leave that situation? And then you'll be able to dictate the question on a deeper level on, oh, was that a loyalty issue, or was it a different value? Was it a different value that made them leave? Oh, I didn't get along with the team. Um, I wasn't communicating. I yelled at a client. They won't say they're yelling at a client, but they'll say, I had a disagreement with the client. Oh, what was your disagreement with the client? Oh, they wanted something and I didn't feel that was necessary for them. Okay, now I'm seeing it's hitting another portion of my values, not actually the loyalty one, but the communication one, and they don't hit that. So you can start checking off boxes on if they're reaching all of your values, because all of your values are somewhat going to work together in some way, form, or another. But that loyalty, non-negotiable value, like I said, it's a non-negotiable one, but there's probably a deeper meaning behind why they're not loyal, and trying to figure out the behaviors on why they're not loyal. You're no psychologist, but being able to just be like, oh, well, that's not a reason we want you to leave, or that may be a reason we can keep them to stay. Is it, money? Is it connection? Do they just like the people that they work with that keeps them around? Stuff like that. And so this is a good time that I'll allow you guys to go in on your worksheet and write stuff down. And if you feel like you have questions during this, if we want to go back into the questions, I'm very willing to do that.
Thanks, Zach. If you have any questions, gang, you feel free. If you don't want to, you can ping yourself in the Q&A. The chat is enabled too, so whatever format you prefer, and then I can also take yourself off mute and push you into the presentation if you want to ask live. we'll give the group a couple more moments to work on this time, ask questions, and then we can make sure that we allow for wrap up.
Definitely. Yeah, while you're back to your question earlier, Michelle, on going even deeper on when should you do this. This sheet right here is probably the one I use the most. This is the worksheet that I'll continue to evolve and change as we continue to learn, because I think that's the hardest part with asking these questions. You're gonna have evolving versions of the questions as well, based off of the answers and the circumstances you're seeing. So for instance, confidence, what makes you stuck, may evolve later to of like, what makes you stuck? Why did you just decide not to work on that project anymore? Or why did you end up doing this or not going that direction? And so there could be a lot more in-depth questions that you can kind of learn and evolve from. So these sheets that I'm giving you, um, I would easily look at them with leadership team, or bring someone in like myself to work on them with the team and figure them out. But uh, work on these, and every time that you have a monthly management meeting, or an overall quarterly meeting, you can continue to assess these questions, because each manager's gonna probably have a little bit different take on how they're utilizing these questions. All right. We do have a spot for Q&A, and we're getting close to the end here. So what I'll do is I'll finish this up, and we'll leave it to the Q&A section. So we can just open it up and go deeper on some of this stuff, and go back and forth if we need to. But as we wrap up, I want you to realize that values aren't just those words that you put up on the back of your studio. They're guided. They're supposed to be a guide towards the vision and the team around that communication and that behavior that you want to display. The goal of this webinar wasn't necessarily for you guys to learn how to hire people. It's really meant to be a guide towards the connection between you, your team, and the vision you want for the studio, so that you can start hiring the right people moving forward. And that is it. We will leave it to the Q&A section.
Zach, we will put this in the recap on how people can get a hold of you, but cue the QR code. Amazing. Thank you so much for doing that. And then we will hang here if anyone wants to just throw things again in the chat or the Q&A. And we will button up with the recap and the workbook link, just in case you had trouble accessing it. All of that, it will be emailed out after this.
Yeah, definitely. I know this is a lot. I know this is a lot to take on in a 1 hour webinar. I really love my goal for all of you is I want you to kind of sit on this for a little bit, because as we tried to answer some questions there on loyalty, like how deep could we really get into that if we had, a nice one-on-one or an hour session. And so, for a limited time, for any of the Loyalsnap members, we are offering a 75% discount on the strategy portion of what we do for the agency. And you can take up this offer just by going to the QR code there, scheduling a call with me. And if you move forward with that, and after the fact, if you did need a brand or web development type job, we will take off the whole fee before the discount on top of what that would look like. And definitely reach out to us to know a little bit further. We are actually in the process right now of finishing development on our first round of our front-facing plugin that's meant for studios of multiple sizes, which will help with better conversion and membership rate. And it will start to be offered into free integrations into studio management softwares in the near future. So definitely reach out to us if you want to be a first leg on any of that. But just reach out to me and say Loyalsnap, and when we have our call, and we'll talk further about those discounts.
Thanks. Zach. And Audrey has one more question. We can,
Yeah,
you
my
should
favorite.
feel free, but she wanted to know how can you essentially take your values and put it in a job post?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good question. So I like to and here's a funny thing. I actually utilize my values to dictate who we move forward in the hiring process. So what do I mean by that? Like um one of our biggest values is communication, for instance. And so if we write a job post and we're asking someone to come in and do this position, we have that Easter egg that we put at the end that basically says, hey, we don't want you to submit your resume here. We want you to submit it here. Um, and if they submit through the wrong link, then we know, okay, they're not great at communication. Like they're not looking at that. And if they submit a resume and they write no words at all, they just submit it. They're not like, hey, my name is this. They don't have a cover letter or any stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to delete them right away. I have to, because it shows that they're not communicating effectively for any type of role. To me, that's a value. So if you're talking about the structure altogether, um, I first have to understand your values, but I just use it within the overall process of the description of the company. And I literally just say, hey, these are our values. And I say, hey, if these values align with you, um, hopefully this job is good and hopefully this job is great for you. I mean, saying the non-negotiable ones are probably not needed. I mean, I think every company wants loyalty, so we're looking for loyal employees, probably wouldn't probably get dismissed, because I don't think the ones that don't have loyalty would care. They'd submit anyway, right? So trying to find ways that you can use your values from a much more decision-making process and less so of how would you put it in your resume, I think is a good way for you to find behaviors within those values um, without necessarily having to write your values down, right? Uh, to give you a further example, and how that works with behaviors and marketing and hiring, like I'm a big believer of connection. And so like we don't do mass outreach. Like I don't believe that that's a connection based thing. I do webinars, I talk to people. So that dictates my marketing direction, and how we're going to communicate within our marketing directions. So utilizing your values from those types of behaviors, of looking at them and saying, hey, what can we do within the hiring process that makes us unique, and also we can dictate behaviors around the interactions of how they work with us and how they submit the resume, how they write the resume, how they do certain things. I definitely think is a very beneficial way for you to weed out the people that you don't feel like are going to match your values. And that's just going to take time for you to go in and test something and see what works and see what doesn't.
Thanks, Zach. I know Audrey had one more question. Feel free, Audrey, go ahead. It was about trial shifts.
Yeah. So we got to the point where the interviews didn't seem, and this will definitely help, our interviews be more effective. But because the interviews were not very effective for us, we implemented like a trial shift. So you come and work for a half a day with the rest of the team, and they are the ones sort of screening you to see how you do with this or that. So um, maybe it's self-evident and obvious, but like, I guess, are there any tricks around testing those values in that short amount of time when we're actually working with them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. That's a great question, and I think that that's very similar to like what I have to do from an agency perspective, and having someone do a test of some sort that has to do with their skill set, right? And I dictate that set. I dictate not just how good they are at the skill, but how they interact within that environment. So depending on what your values are, you can definitely go in, and so I think what you could do in this scenario is you could say, all right, what questions would we ask on hiring, right? Like what the sense of feeling stuck, for instance. Sense of feeling stuck. Maybe when you have them come in, when you have them come in for that half a day, you just have to hit that regimen on what you're going to talk about, what you're going to have them do during that one day. Maybe I would set up a situation where I'm like, hey, let's set up a situation where he has a chance to fail, or they have a chance to fail. How are they going to react to that situation? How are they going to overcome that situation? And you can get pretty unique with that stuff. I mean, it could be something even along the lines of is like the management software is not working for 5 minutes. What are you going to do? You know, like try to figure out something. And that's a way you can utilize, I would utilize like my confidence pillar, for instance. How do they overcome that situation in the studio environment? Maybe you have and I know you're not going to have a member come up and yell at them or anything, but how could you have a situation arise with a member or a situation arise? How would you dictate how they interact? And if you can't come up with a situation around that behavior, then you're just going to have to watch for it. When you're going and training them, having them train for half a day, maybe you have them if you're having them do a class, I don't know. Or if it's an admin, it's a completely different, position. And just making sure you're watching those behaviors, and the person that's hiring them is watching those behaviors and sticking to those types of behaviors around what they're doing. And so you can definitely, I think you can definitely dictate those in half a day. I mean, I think it's, they always say you can always judge a book by its cover, right? But you can really get a sense of a person and who they are within a half a day. I mean, I think it's and so if you're able to just give yourself guidelines for that half a day, I think that you'll get used to it too. I mean, I have calls right now with people, and there are certain questions and the way they answer, I'm like, yeah, that's not going to work. So it becomes easier over time for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate
You're
that.
Thanks, Zach, and thanks, Audrey, for such engaging so much. It was great. All right, gang, we're gonna call it here. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Look out for the recording and the summary, and more to come from Zach.